Hi, fam. When you think about the spectrum of life, meaning there's always, polarities, middle ground, the extremities and the center of all things in life, opinions, lifestyles, perspectives, you name it, there's always some sort of spectrum we tend to go by. But when you do a quick review of your life, how do you find where do you find that you have seen yourself more at? Within the polarities or within the center spaces, the middle grounds? Like, for example, me, when I look at, it's just really pausing to sort of scan your life and acknowledging the patterns. And there's so many different type of patterns for so many different reasons, but just in a very like universal way. I have found that I've always been in the middle ground for a lot of reasons. Anything from, you know, being born first generation, growing up between two worlds, not necessarily one or the other. Even my language, always not necessarily the best in either, but we should do master the Spanglish. Um, my sign, my sign has always been associated with all the shades of gray and not necessarily a spectrum. A lot of the paths that I have found myself in have been more within the middle grounds. A lot of bridging. There's a lot of lessons when you realize, when you sort of scan, pause and scan, and sort of look for your patterns and see where I've kind of been or where I've spent a lot of time. You also realize that there's a lot of lessons, challenges, and ways in which it has shaped you being within those spaces. And for me, definitely being in the middle ground, there's a lot of bridging that you do. I wind up being in a lot of positions throughout my life where there's a lot of bridging within communities or perspectives or opinions. Even when we had a spiritual metaphysical shop, Botanical, we weren't necessarily an extreme, spiritual shop. It was actually very grounded, middle of the ground way of experiencing that world, and ultimately really just, above all, supporting the connection of you to yourself and self-care, which is ultimately the most important. And so it's always been all of these areas in my life where I have found myself to be in middle grounds, and I have learned a couple things. One, sometimes people get very uncomfortable when they can't easily place you or label you in a box, or label you with something. Two, you definitely do get a lot of judgment because, again, sometimes it's not as easy to sort of make you out, like, what is this person made of? What do they really think? Which is understandable. But then also in other ways, for example, it has made me very comfortable within the uncomfortable. It's one of the reasons why my sister and I have such an amazing and eclectic community, because we have been in such middle grounds in very particular situations throughout our life that we've been so blessed to have and create beautiful relationships with people with so many backgrounds. It definitely has built a muscle being in these middle centers. So I find myself to be pretty comfortable in almost any environment because of it. So yeah, it's just one of those things that, I like to understand a little bit better and acknowledge. And so yeah, where do you find, when you look at your life, that you've kind of been in? Have you been more within the polarities? And what lessons have come out of that? Because remember, this is the key, is that a lot of times when we stop to understand and to acknowledge where we have found ourselves in a lot, what our patterns are, not only are those usually the places where we will receive really amazing lessons, powerful lessons, and sometimes some of the hardest lessons, but those are also the places that we tap into and develop our self-empowerment. So it's not about right or wrong. It's not about where you should be. It's about acknowledging where you are or where you have been or what your pattern is, and figuring out those lessons. There's always so much to learn from it. There's always so much to take. There's always so much to shift, and it's just nice to acknowledge. It's great to acknowledge, like, oh wow, I have been in these places, and I'm really good at this because of that, or wow, I have to shift that so that it could be better in this way. It's nice to just do that inner, little self-evaluation every so often. Let me know what you think. Ciao.